next up, we have David Hughes, who is the Climate Justice Chair at the Faculty Union at Rutgers University. That's the American Association of University Professors, American Federation of Teachers, AFT. So David is going to be speaking to us about a very interesting initiative between the Rutgers campus and surrounding communities. And I'll just turn it over to him so we can hear from him and perhaps think about how those of us here in the Valley might apply some of the lessons from his experience.
All right, thanks a lot, Kevin. And I'm really happy to be here in Massachusetts, so to speak, my state where I was born. I'm going to talk as background about how our union made this turn towards climate justice. And then I'm going to talk about a climate strike we organized with student and community groups. Then talk about what Kevin mentioned, which is a community solar 3-city program we're advocating, and then talk about the next steps. So how did our union get involved in climate matters? It's not obvious. We are a social justice union, of course. We care a great deal about equity among our faculty and between our faculty and other groups generally in the United States and the world. But it was only in 2019 when we started to take climate on board. And we did this by forming a task force of our faculty who expressed an interest in working on that issue through the union. These were natural scientists, atmospheric scientists, physicists, and so on, and as you probably know, the natural scientists don't come to the union automatically. Our density has always been greatest in departments like English and history. So it was gratifying that they wanted to come to the union. And they were frustrated. They said, look, we've been advocating for decarbonization and other reforms for 20 years, and we've gotten nowhere. Can our little piece of the labor union help us? You know, when we're paying all these dues and everything too. What can you do for us? So we formed this committee, and at about the same time, and this was again in the summer of 2019, student groups approached us. We already had very good relationships with all the lefty student activist groups because we had a bi-weekly meeting held in the basement of the union, which we call Rutgers One, and there's a kind of pooling of expertise. We also have, for many years, provided paid internships to student activists to do their activism in our offices. This was before the pandemic. Obviously, now we have that activism, that internship is virtual. So we already had these relationships, and they came to us and they said, we want to organize this climate strike in the basement, like where we organize a lot of stuff, but we want you to really be part of it and put resources into it, put people into it. So we were very thrilled to do that. And that led to the union endorsing the Green New Deal, our local endorsing the Green New Deal. Let me just, sorry here, I'm looking at my face and I'm trying to figure out how to get my own face off this, and I can't seem to do that once I'm the the star. But anyway, I've made myself smaller now. So we endorsed the Green New Deal nationally. We also proposed with student groups a kind of local Green New Deal. And that would be something that's already been mentioned. That would be our university going carbon neutral. So we passed that resolution. We pushed that up to national AFT to jump a little bit ahead. And national AFT then, with constant pressure from our local and many others, and many very powerful teacher unions in Boston and Chicago and LA, and the AFT endorsed the Green New Deal in the summer of 2020. That's jumping a little ahead. So locally, again, we passed this resolution. We held this climate strike with student and, by that point, lots of community groups in September of 2019. 700 people showed up, which is a pretty large crowd for New Brunswick. And that started a process. We had 4 demands at that point: fossil fuel divestment by the university, a climate action plan involving net zero emissions by 2030, and the establishment of an Office of Sustainability. A lot of things dragged on for a long time, and this horrible thing called COVID spread death upon the earth, and we lost some time, but now I'm in a position to tell you that we won 3 out of the 4 things. We won fossil fuel divestment in February of 2021, February of this year. We got the plan last month. That's two things. We got half a thing because the plan says net zero, but by 2040. And we got an Office of Sustainability, but that's also half a thing because we're not sure if that office is going to have any power. So there's still a lot to work on, and student groups are still very much engaged in this and getting re-engaged as we return to campus somewhat. But I want to tell you now about community solar, because that's an idea that emerged after the climate strike as we kind of pussyfooted around with the administration while they gradually pulled together their own plan. It didn't take long to persuade the administration that they should put up a lot of solar panels in a lot of places on campus. The way they wanted to do that was going to be quick and dirty by hiring or contracting with a private firm through what's known as a power purchase agreement. And the way that works is this large firm like Sunrun is the biggest one in the US, owns the panels, leasing the roof space or parking canopy space from Rutgers, and then makes a lot of money and gives Rutgers some of that money through the lease arrangement. Often, in fact, the company like Sunrun doesn't actually have the money. We're talking about a $700 million investment in solar panels and infrastructure at Rutgers. So Sunrun would go out to private equity markets, and those people make a lot of money. And private capital is rushing into solar farms because it's the best bet in town. You almost can't lose. And you benefit from a 26% federal tax credit, which incidentally, unless we get this passed in the Build Back Better bill, but so far, universities, unions, community groups, nonprofits, and so on do not benefit from that incentive because they don't have tax obligations. I can talk more in question and answer about some very complicated tax changes that are maybe written into the legislation that would help us a lot. So we said, what's a different model? And we talked to a lot of groups. Eventually, we found one in your area, Co-op Power, and Lynn Benander, who runs that. And together with her and community groups, we came up with a community solar plan. And that involves, there are two options, and the legislation is pretty good in New Jersey for this. One option is where community groups own the panels cooperatively. Now remember, these panels will be on top of Rutgers, and Rutgers would be one of the owners as well, but co-equal with all the others. So in Camden and Newark, which is where our smaller campuses are, there are community groups already who want to do this and have a couple hundred members in each case willing to jump onto this. But we still need the permission of the administration. The great benefit of this model is that then you can establish a community-controlled resilience hub. There is the impact side of climate change. People on the left, we care a great deal about decarbonizing, but we can't forget the impact side as well. And the impacts are felt very harshly on our vulnerable, mostly Black and brown communities in Camden, New Brunswick, and Newark. That's where our campuses are. They are in the poorest towns in New Jersey and some of the poorest towns in the East Coast. And they suffered enormously when Hurricane Sandy came. The next one that hits us that directly will be tremendously, tremendously damaging. What you need in a hurricane and in the aftermath of a hurricane, you need a place to keep medicine cool, insulin and so on. You need a place to charge your nebulizer or your oxygen tank feeder machine thing, right? Medical devices. A lot of people died in Puerto Rico because they couldn't keep their medicine cold and their medical devices running for the couple of months in the mountains that they went without electricity. So Rutgers can provide, underneath the panels, a resilience hub accessible to communities. That's what we want in each of the three towns as well. And then we want hiring. We want this program, this installation to be run as an apprenticeship program with a project labor agreement and so on, wherein these same residents of Newark, Camden, and New Brunswick are trained for jobs on the Rutgers campus in the solar industry and then jobs more widely. And if this is done right, an institution as large and as statewide as Rutgers can be an engine for a really socially just form of energy transition, urban-based, resilience-providing, and job-creating energy transition in New Jersey. Next steps. So we have to organize, continue to organize, and Students for Environmental Awareness, which is our main partner in this, has made community solar their fall and I hope their spring campaign. There are some interesting bargaining issues. I mean, all of this will be part of our bargaining campaign, which is about to start because our contract ends in July, and we do bargain for the common good. Some of these issues may actually be really mandatory subjects. So parking is a mandatory subject in our contract. Our administration has always set up parking as an all or nothing thing. So you pay $300 or something for an annual parking pass, and then people tend to use it every day. There's no option to pay, even $10 per day that you want to park. So we want to change the parking to provide incentives for faculty and staff to commute less by car to work. For staff unions, I mean, telecommuting is a huge thing. We could cut carbon emissions quite a bit around here by going to a 3-day work week for people now on a 5-day week. The pandemic, of course, has opened up people's imagination about that. Finally, housing. If you think about students, of course, most of the commuting is done by students. Why do they live so far from our campuses? Well, it's expensive around our campuses. Rutgers is the premier landlord in the neighborhoods of our campuses. Their dorm rates have gone higher and higher. We did a study of this a few years ago with a community group called New Labor. Generally, what you find is the ceiling for a dorm room becomes the floor for an apartment in one of the neighborhoods run by somebody you might call a slumlord. So as Rutgers raises its rents, so do all the surrounding private landlords. And we would like to have Rutgers act more in a public housing way of building dormitories for students which are affordable and therefore keep them living within walking distance or biking distance or at least bus distance of campus. Finally, to get back, I'm running out of time here, but to get back to the national stuff, we're represented, our local is represented on the Climate Justice Task Force of AFT, because I'm on that task force and I report to our committee and our leadership and so on. And we have been advancing actually with a plan to put solar panels and clean energy retrofits, along with, of course, the asbestos remediation and things like that, improvement of HVAC in schools all across the country. And we're hoping to get a lot of federal money for that from the Build Back Better bill. The other thing that you may see, and this is where I would love to work with some of you NEA members out there, if we could get higher education to divest from fossil fuels, that would be amazing. There's a lot of support for this within powerful AFT locals. This has never happened before in terms of a profession-wide divestment. But I think it's time, and if AFT and NEA could join with that and basically say the teaching and academic professions are done with fossil fuels, because we know about this stuff, we teach about this stuff, it's in our wheelhouse, and more importantly, we steward the next generation, and we cannot let our pensions and our money go towards robbing their future. So that's it. I'll be happy to take questions whenever the schedule allows that. Thank you very much.